Greetings, West Davidson Public Library listeners and viewers. We are so delighted to have a very special guest here today, Alan Bailey. Alan is a professor and a librarian at East Carolina University. And the topic of this morning's discussion is building compassionate communities using children's literature. So Alan, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me this morning.
We are so excited to have you. And Ginger and I have, and there's JJ Johnson. She just says hi.
Hi, JJ.
Ginger and I at our library, we've been highlighting some book recommendations for children and middle grades and young adults and teens for Black History Month. And we just thought how great it would be to have an expert on the topic, and which is why we asked you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Alan?
Sure. Just a few things about myself. I was born and raised in Eastern North Carolina. I'm from the charming little town of Washington, North Carolina, affectionately called Little Washington by so many people. I received my undergraduate degree from East Carolina University, and I received my advanced degrees from East Carolina University and North Carolina Central. So I'm proud to be both a pirate and an eagle. Over my career, I've worked in school libraries, public libraries, community college libraries, as well as university libraries.
Well, that's pretty impressive. Why did you become a librarian?
That's kind of funny. I always wanted to be a teacher, but after serving as a substitute teacher for a year, I had my doubts. I'm from that age that to be a substitute teacher, all you had to have was 1 year of college. So after my freshman year, well, really after midway of my sophomore year, I took a year out of school. And during that year, I did lots of jobs, and substitute teaching was one of those things. But yeah, the idea of teaching one subject to the same students each day became less and less appealing to me. I know a lot of substitute teachers talk about the discipline problem. That wasn't a problem for me. My thing was just, I was like, could I just teach language arts 6 periods a day? Well, someone suggested I become a librarian and work with all the students in the school. Well, my immediate response was, a librarian? Who wants to come in and check out books all day? I was actually riding a city bus when I said this, and one of the men on the bus turned around and said, "So you think that's all librarians do?" He said, "I'm a public librarian. Why don't you shadow me for a few days?" He gave me a business card. I shadowed him for a few days, and here I am 40 years later.
That's wonderful. What a cool story.
I wish I could remember his name so I could thank him for this, but I cannot remember his name to save my life.
Well, I think we should all thank him because you've had such an illustrious career. Again, the topic of this morning's discussion is building compassionate communities using children's literature. Alan, why is it important for young people to have access to diverse books in their schools and libraries?
The main reason, I think, is we do live in a global and diverse society. And to be successful and to simply be good citizens, I think children need to embrace and celebrate differences. I know many of you may have heard of Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop. Dr. Bishop developed a theory called mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And just for some people who may not know, I will just briefly talk about that, but this article is worth going back, reading, and researching. She said books should be like mirrors where children actually see themselves and their cultures in books. But then again, books should be like mirrors where children see other people and cultures that are completely different from their own. And then the third aspect is think of children's books as sliding glass doors. Children should be exposed to books written and illustrated so well that they feel that they have walked into these books. They feel like they are actual parts of these books. An example with me, I grew up just being fascinated by royal families of Great Britain, especially the Tudors. And I was so into this history that even now, as a full-blown adult, or as one of my nephews said, you're middle-aged now. And I couldn't, it hurt for a minute, but I thought he's right. I am middle-aged now. I have to remind myself I've never visited Great Britain because these castles and cities and everything is so vivid in my mind from reading books as a children. Sometimes I really get caught up thinking I've actually been there and had these experiences.
Well, that's wonderful. So children's literature or literature in general should be mirrors, windows, and doors.
And
That's
sliding
great.
glass doors, exactly.
Sliding glass doors. If a teacher, librarian, or a parent is wanting to learn more about sharing diverse books with young people, how do you suggest they get started?
A good place I would always say to start would be award-winning books for children. For example, when you're talking about diverse books, think of things like the Coretta Scott King Book Awards, which highlight African American experience. You have the American Indian Youth Literature Award, which does the same. Asian Pacific American Award. There's the National Jewish Book Award. There's the Pure Bell Prayer Award for Latino culture. You have the Stonewall Book Awards for LGBTQ experiences, and even the Snyder Book Awards for children with disabilities. So when we're talking about diversity, a lot of times people get into the black and white race thing, but that is very important. But it should also be a little more broad into religion, sexual orientation, abilities, and so forth.
That's great advice. What are some pitfalls, if any, to avoid?
With these pitfalls, I will say I've made some of them myself. So I'm just not pointing my finger. I'm talking about myself as well. But one thing, just because a book has a black, brown, or disabled child on the cover, don't just assume that that means it's a good book. Children's books need to be authentic, and these books really need to be void of stereotypes and biases. And we have to first realize that we all have stereotypes and biases. So
Mhm.
I really suggest when you're dealing with books that's outside of your culture or outside of your religion or sexual orientation, read reviews to
Mhm.
make sure that they actually are books that got great reviews, because you may read it and think, oh, that's wonderful. But if that's not part of your culture or your experience, you might miss some very crucial things. And that's when I also say it's very helpful to have a diverse circle of friends and colleagues. Um,
Mhm.
for example, I know very little about American Indian culture.
Mhm.
Because things we grew up reading in books and seeing on television is probably as far away from American Indian culture as possible.
Mhm.
But I do know Dr. Debbie Reese, who's known internationally. Well, she's known, internationally as an expert on American Indian literature for children. So sometimes before I put books on a reading list or I suggest books, if it's not something that I have found on a list actually by American Indians, I sometimes would just send Debbie an email and say, have you read this book? I'm thinking about putting it on a list. What's your opinion on it? A lot of times she said, oh, it's a great book, Alan, go with it. And sometimes she says, well, you may want to look at these tribal aspects because although this is close, this is something this tribe of Indians did. Another tribe did those sorts of things.
So that's some great advice too. So tell us a little bit about the Teaching Resource Center at Joyner Library.
Oh, well, I could tell you about that all day, but I'll try to give you the short version of it. I tell people to think of the TRC as a preschool, a pre-K through high school library sitting in the middle of an academic library.
Mhm.
Because we are so unique to an academic campus and a library, but we are well embraced and we're very necessary. We provide service to the College of Education and the Department of Child Development and Family Relations primarily. But we assist anyone on campus who incorporates children's or adult resources or young adult resources in their courses. For instance, a lot of the faculty and staff, this is the only library their children know, because their faculty and staff come and pick up their books, or if they're here working, they'll come by the library, work a little bit in the library, and let their children browse the books and check them out and go home. And our collections, in addition to books, we do have the standard things a school library would have, like media. We do have teaching aids or manipulative. We have guided readers, big books, and we also house a 3D printing studio, and we have a maker space.
That's wonderful. I remember, and Alan, the first time I ever came to the Teaching Resource Center, my daughter was 9 and she's now 21 and a student there. And I brought her with me. Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. So what criteria do you, first of all, how many books do you have in your collection?
With books, we have approximately about 55,000 books.
Okay. So you can find just about anything that you're looking for, I would think. What criteria do you use to determine which books to put in your collection?
Well, that merges right into something you just said, because I was just about to elaborate on that. We're not a bookstore or a public library, and we don't try to be. So our books are not simply good books. We are a curriculum center. So we purchase books that educators can use in the classrooms. These are usually books that correlate with state and national standards. And this doesn't mean we don't have wonderful books that children enjoy. It means that we may not have some of the popular series that you can find at Barnes and Nobles or a public library, because people will often ask and say, "You mean you don't have that series?" And I have to explain to them, yes, I'm aware of the series and it's a wonderful series, but it's not something that a teacher would actually use in their classroom. And that's when I have to let people know that we are a curriculum center. And that does differ from a public library and actually bookstore. Yeah, one thing we get, because we don't have a lot of craft books, and people get upset about that sometimes, but I tell them, oh, go to your public library. Your public library will have lots of books about craft, and so that'll be the perfect place for that.
So earlier you mentioned the Coretta Scott King Book Awards Committee. Can you tell us a little bit about that committee and how you got involved?
The committee recognizes excellence in African-American children's literature, and these books are written and or illustrated by African Americans, and they do show an aspect of the African American experience also. And that African American experience can be quite broad. It doesn't necessarily have to be slavery or racism. It could just be anything about culture, but just something in the experience. But one thing that I do get tickled about, when the book Crown came out, and everybody loved that book. A wonderful book. I could read it, and I've read it to so many kids over and over again. But I was highlighting it in one of my workshops, and a white teacher that I have been friends with for years came over and she says, "Alan, I love this book." She said, "Thank you for highlighting." She said, "I use it in my classes." She said, "But I think I can ask you this. What is a do-rag?" Because that book talks about a do-rag. And she said, "I've been wondering, but I didn't want to ask anybody because maybe something I shouldn't know." So it was great that I could tell her that, and that she could now have that sense. I think that's what a lot of wonderful books should do. It should give you a little taste of the culture. And I went on and on with her about how much fun going to the barber shop actually is. It's often been called the Black Man's Country Club. And even though I don't have much hair, that's actually because I go to the barber shop once a week. And
Yeah.
it's for a haircut and a shave, but it's also for that experience of an African American barbershop.
And Crown is such a beautifully illustrated book. And you had the illustrator at Joiner Library a few years back, I
Yes,
remember.
yes, yes. And I that was an amazing experience. It was an amazing
It
experience.
really was.
And they also have some more books out that are just as good, if not better. So, Derek Barnes and oh gosh, I'm having a brain freeze here. I know Gordon. Ah, I'll just have to
Okay.
deal with my brain freeze right now. They have other things out as well. But getting back to CSK, although
Hmm.
the committee has recognized children's books since 1970, I had never heard of the award until I took a children's literature course around 1983, because I think I was a junior in undergraduate school.
Hmm.
I was simply amazed to discover these wonderful books about African Americans, and I began reading as many of them as possible. And this was really the time when I knew I wanted to be a part of that committee. And my opportunity actually came in 2006 when I was invited to attend a CSK meeting while I was attending ALA's Midwinter Conference. And
Hmm.
since that day, I've been actively involved with CSK. I started off by doing grunt work, and what I call grunt work is like stuff in the bags that we give away to people for our breakfast. I took tickets at the door for the breakfast. I did anything somebody needed done. I'd raise my hand and volunteer. And from that, I've served on numerous of their committees, because one of the things people don't realize is that the Coretta Scott King Book Awards Committee is made up of maybe 11 subcommittees.
Hmm.
The jury is just one of the many committees. So over the years, I've served on lots of those subcommittees. I've chaired many of those committees. I served on the jury twice. I was on the jury in 2009 and 2010, and I recently served as chair of that committee.
Well, that's really impressive. Can you tell us a little bit about how CSK chooses the books each year?
Sure. Publishers submit titles that's released in a current year. Let's just say for right now, publishers are submitting titles that have been published in 2021. The committee members read and evaluate these books based on CSK criteria. And of course, there are lots of criteria, but things like a clear plot, well-drawn characters. We look at the style of writing and make sure it's consistent with the suitable age of the child that it's intended for. We look for accuracy. And now on the committee, that was one of the hardest things to do, because when you had nonfiction books, we really needed to search hard for accuracy, because that's one thing about it. Once you put that seal on that book,
Hmm.
can't
You're
take
standing
it back.
behind it.
You
Yeah,
have to.
yeah.
So you really want to make sure there are not some things that you're missing. So we go through those books with a fine-tuned comb. They're read to children and groups to get the feedback, because one of the things about it, we're adults reading children's literature. And sometimes we have to realize, okay, we may like it as an adult, but it may not speak to a child. So we have to make sure that we actually work with children with the ages the books are intended to actually see how they respond to the book. And two qualities that we talk about more than anything else when evaluating these books, we're looking for books that are distinguished and books that are just excellence, that just has excellence in it, because they're the two main things we want in these books.
So it's there's quite a lot that goes into those stickers every year.
That's
Can
why
you?
I tell people that award books are they're vetted very well. So I know as educators, I never tell people to recommend something without reading it themselves. But the only place that I would say you might could fudge with that a little bit is actually if it's an award-winning book by one of these well-known children's awards, because you would not believe how many books people read. You read the book at least once, and once the book is nominated by the committee, some books I have read 3, 4 times because you want to make sure you catch all of the elements within the book.
So how do they determine which books win?
Okay. As I said, the books are received throughout the years, and the jury members read and evaluate all of the books that are submitted. Um, Even if you get through a book and you realize, this is not really of quality, I read every one from cover to cover to make sure that it didn't get better somewhere or something else happened. So every book was read, and the number of books you receive a year can vary. And so it could be as low as 500, it can be as high as 1,000. So you just never know what you can get. One year when I was on the committee, I was really keeping up with my reading because, I was still working full time and still having a life, but keeping up with these books. And one day I was just like, okay, I might have a free weekend because I'm caught up. The mailman came that Friday and I got a box of YA books. So,
Oh, wow.
about books.
Yeah, the big books.
It was like so much for being caught up. It's time to get in there and start reading a little bit. But as the jury reads the books, they nominate ones that they think are outstanding or distinguished throughout the year. If I'm not mistaken, we nominated some like every month.
Mm-hmm.
And at ALA's midwinter meeting, so if we were talking to like right now, they're reading books that were published in 2021. So in January of 2022, the jury would meet, they deliberate, they select the winners and honors, and those titles are actually announced at the Youth Media Awards in 2022.
That's wonderful. And I've had the honor of being able to see the Youth Media Awards in person a couple of times. It's real. It's like the Academy Awards, the Oscars of children's literature. It's something to see.
Yes.
So Ginger and I featured some book talks about some in honor of Black History Month, some books all across the ages. But what are a few of your must reads right now?
Okay, you're really trying to get me in trouble, aren't you? I will say, I'm playing it safe here. I will say any of the 2021 CSK winners, because they are fresh, they're new. If you have not read any of those winners, honors, I would say put those at the very top of your list. I have read a lot of them, but I still have quite a few I have not. So that's one of the things I'm trying to do now. When it comes to must reads, I'm gonna play it kind of safe again. I'll just kind of mention some of what my favorite authors and illustrators, and I'm gonna still get in trouble because I know I'm gonna miss some
You're gonna miss somebody, and you have a lot of friends in that arena, I know.
Yeah, but if I want to be honest about some of my favorites, I have lots of favorites, but the ones that just come off my head, Jacqueline Woodson, Jason Reynolds. Oh, I love Carol Boston Weatherford.
Yes,
I think she's wonderful, and she's one of our North Carolina very own. So I love that as well. James Ransom, and even though James Ransom lives in New York, he's originally from North Carolina. Floyd Cooper, Williams Garcia, Kadir Nelson, Brian Collier,
Kwame Alexander.
Yes, Kwame Alexander, Jerry Craft, Kekla Magoon. I could go on and on, but
On and on and on.
yeah,
Yeah.
I could go on and on and on. But this is just a short list of people that I think they just produce consistently
Mhm.
outstanding work. It's consistently outstanding work.
I'm also Nikki Grimes comes to mind too.
Yes.
She's always didn't she? And she recently won a big CSK award, I think.
Yes. And now you see, now you make me think of people like Angela
And Kelly,
Johnson. So I
yeah,
mean, it goes on and on.
it goes
And you
on and
know,
on. Yeah.
that's one of the good things that we probably couldn't say 30 years from now.
Mhm.
Our list of African American authors or illustrators would have been a very short list where we probably could have just thought of all of them. But it's good to see that we just have more and more, and that list is just getting longer.
Growing.
And still not enough. If you look at
Mhm.
statistics, we still need more African American books, but we're getting there. We're
We're
making
making
progress.
progress each year. Yes.
We
And
are.
JJ suggested Kelly Starling Lyons,
Yeah.
who's
Oh,
also North
yes.
Carolina.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Kwame Mabalia, also North Carolina.
Yes. And he's even
Yes.
doing things with fantasy kind of
Hmm.
things that we don't have a lot of African American books on that topic.
And
Yeah.
what I'll do when we finish our conversation is I'll post the links to the CSK website so folks can get those book lists.
That
And
would be
they keep the lists um, from years past.
right. So you
So
will be able to find all of the winners from 1970 up to the present.
that's wonderful. Heather White has a question, and she says that you've also served on the Caldecott Medal Committee. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And,
2016 Caldecott Committee.
and how was that experience comparatively? It says, I know that the book award recognizes illustration and picture books, but have you seen more recognition of African American artists or diverse books included into Caldecott?
That is great. The committees are very similar. Um, and the good thing about the Caldecott is you're focusing in just on um, the illustrations. The bad
Mhm.
part is you're going to get things, a wide variety. And I don't know if that's a bad thing or not, but you read a lot of picture books. And when I first got on the committee, I really thought, okay, these are picture books. This will be much easier than some of the other award committees. No, because you're looking at the pictures, but you can't have a good picture book if you don't have good writing.
Right.
And the two have to be married, and it has to be a strong and good marriage. So yes, it took a lot more reading and exploration and evaluation that I had thought of. As far as just looking at the diversity of the books, I think they have been, and this is Alan Bailey's opinion, and I speak for myself here. I think there have been quality books from people of color before,
Hmm.
but I think the makeup of the committee was not diverse.
Right.
Um, and I'm quoting what someone else said, and somebody said, for many years it was an old white women's club. That it
Hmm.
seemed like the same women rotated um,
On and off.
off of. They went from maybe Caldecott to Newberry but Alice has done a great job over the last, oh gosh, I would say 5 or 10 years of trying to make their committees more inclusive. I
Hmm.
was on the committee in 2016. Um, there were two males, um, and I was a black male. There was a white male. He was actually a schoolmaster of a private school, but he had a strong background in children's literature. And
Hmm.
then everybody else on that committee, even though they were all white females, their backgrounds and their ages were just from every spectrum you can think of. And I think that was just wonderful hearing so many takes on the literature. Um, Before we started, someone spoke to us and said, come in as a student, don't come in as a teacher, because you need to realize everybody on the committee are experts in children's literature. So
Mm-hmm.
you're not coming in as the top dog who's going to tell everybody else what the best books are. And that was probably the most helpful advice that I got, because some books that I had chosen thinking, oh, this is going to be an award-winning book. By the time we discussed it and went through details, and by having other experts in the room, I could honestly say, okay, you know what? This is still a book that speaks to me that I can use. It is an outstanding book. But compared to the other books that we're looking at, you're right. It's not high on that list, because I couldn't think how a group of people, I think there were 13 of us, I never thought how we were going to sit in a room and in 2 or 3 days come up with the best books. But there was an old saying when I was young that the cream always rises to the top.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what happened. By the time we got to the end of our deliberations, there was just a group of books that rose to the
That just
top.
rose to the
And
top.
then they were the ones that we had to choose which ones would be the winners and which ones would be the honor.
And sometimes you have
You have
books that win multiple awards.
Yes. Yes. Even in 2016, well, a lot of books do it. Because even oh my gosh, y'all have to excuse me. I just have these brain freezes sometimes. But a lot of the books actually win multiple awards. So even that year, Last Stop on Market Street,
Yes, it won the Newbery.
it won the Newbery, it won a Caldecott. So yeah, it won lots of things in different categories. Even
March Book 3, I think, swept the awards one year.
swept one year. I mean, in 2016, I do know. This is one book I'm really trying to think of recently. It was the one that was illustrated by Kadir Nelson and written by Kwame Alexander.
Was it Freedom? No. Yes. Yeah, the Undefeated.
The Undefeated.
Undefeated, yes. It's a
That
beautiful
book,
book.
I
Oh
mean,
my
it
goodness.
swept things, because
Yeah.
I think that was an amazing, amazing book. It was amazing.
Yes. And
So
Kadir Nelson's illustrations are just wow. They're
yeah, Kadir is simply amazing, and I was excited when I heard this book was coming out, because Kadir is still doing some illustrations with children's books, but he's not doing as much. I don't know if you know, but if you look at the covers of the New Yorker,
mm-hmm.
a lot of them over the last few years have been done by Kadir, and he's moving into some other avenues. But I do love his children's books, so it was good to see him come back for a while for the Undefeated. Yes.
Yes, that's a great book. I'll go ahead. Just so tell me, what is on your nightstand right now?
Ah, okay. There are two children's books and there are two adult books right now.
Okay.
Um, the first children's book is Box. Henry Brown Mails Himself to Freedom. That's the one
Yeah.
that's written by Carol Boston Weatherford and illustrated by Michelle Wood. And it recently won a Caldecott honor. And it's a wonderful book. And I've always been fascinated by Henry Brown. So that was great. So I'm reading that. And I realized there was a book by Jacqueline Woodson that I have not read. So it's the book that's called This Is the Rope, and it's a story from the Great Migration.
Mm-hmm.
And the two adult books would be Lovecraft Country by Matt Ruff. I just think the idea of science fiction meets fantasy meets African American history. That is just a great assortment of things. And I also have Abide With Me by Elin Harris on my nightstand as well.
Well, those are some wonderful choices. And you have been such a fantastic guest. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today. This is going to be recorded, so I'll share you the link
Thank you.
when I'm done. But so what is next for Alan Bailey? Are you working on any new projects?
There are, if I'm looking on my list of things, there are actually two things. There are two book awards committees that I want to serve on. I want to serve on the Geisel because these are the best books for beginning readers, and preschool literacy is one of my areas of research. And I also would like to serve on the Stonewall Awards for the best LGBTQ books for children and young adults. So there are two awards that I want to do. And the second thing, I have written 3 children's books, 3 picture books, and they've just kind of been on my back burner for quite a few years. But now I'm really thinking I'm ready to focus on getting them ready to submit to publishers.
Oh, that's exciting. That's
Yeah,
exciting.
I'm excited about that too. Two, I really love. One, I love the premise of it, but I haven't quite flushed it out yet because I think it really should be more of a chapter book. But I really like easy picture books, so I'm fighting hard to keep it as a picture book. But I'm thinking I might have to give up that fight if I want it to still hold, still be at the standards that and tell the story the way I want it to be told. I think it might have to move on to a chapter book, but I'm going to start with the 2 picture books and then move on with the third one.
That's exciting, and I look forward to seeing those projects come to fruition. Thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you.
And appreciate it. We had one person tune in from Brazil. JJ said thank you. Angela said great talk. And thank you so much for our listeners. And we'll see you later. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.